the Automated Vehicles Symposium, and what's this, a book about Startup City? Well, Gabe Klein, you talked a little bit about the impact of automation on cities. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the takeaways from your conversation?
Sure. Well, I was here today on behalf of NACTO, which is the National Association of City Transportation Officials, and I serve on the Strategic Advisory Board. And I was up there with Salita Reynolds, who's the president of NACTO and the general manager of LA Department of Transportation. And what we wanted to really get across today is the sort of human and nature side of this topic. You know, it's very easy, particularly in a setting like this, to get very wonky and get really focused on the technology itself. And I'm not saying that that's not appropriate, but we want to sort of make sure that people see the forest through the trees and understand that fundamentally these are tools that can make cities a better place. We need to make sure that in all the decisions that we make, from our various perches, and I want to be clear, whether you're a technology company or an OEM car maker or a government policy person, we know that you all want to have positive impacts, right? But we want to send a clear message what the 45 cities that are members of NACTO, what they want and what's important to them, and how open-minded they are and willing, not just willing, but want to work with the private sector to enhance cities by using technology.
Yeah, this recent report, and you talked about that. Why don't you briefly give an overview of that, because it's pretty out there as far as the thinking.
Well, you know, I think it's out there in that we put it out there,
right, but
I actually think it's very mainstream. When you look at the idea that we want a maximum speed of 25 mile per hour city streets, right? When you look at the fact that we would like to see shared electric autonomous vehicles and not single occupancy owned autonomous vehicles, or zero occupancy vehicles, because that's just not good for cities. By the way, it's not good for our economy. And so when you look at the NACTO principles in this document, they're extremely mainstream. They're very pro-business, they're pro-people, they're pro-environment. And I think increasingly that's what cities want. They don't want to have to make false choices, right? Either we have to focus endlessly on short-term financial gain at the expense of our citizens, right? Or we have to do things that are good for people and therefore it's bad for business. It's not true. And I think what NACTO is doing is saying that public and private can benefit together, and that's ideal. That's what we want. But it takes a conversation, it takes a dialogue. Really happy that National Academy of Sciences had us here, allowed us to get up and present the views of 45 cities. And I think it's a real signal to the private sector, not just the state and the feds. It's like, hey, this is what's going to make implementation healthier for cities, easier for you. This is what we want. And to be honest, in the long term, it's much better for the companies. And we also want level 4 autonomy in cities. Now, there's nothing wrong with level 1, 2, 3. Those are great. But the fact is that in an urban environment, taking the human and that fallibility out of the equation is really key.
Yeah, and that's what I meant by out there. I mean, it's really thinking kind of outside the box. But it all gets back to what you talked about there a moment. How do you get the public-private working together? Is that what this book's about?
My book is about having much more of an open, honest conversation between the public and private sector, aligning the incentives. Bike sharing is a great example. If you align the incentives between the public and private sector, a system can actually cost more to operate, but generate more revenue and make people happier, and the profits for the city can be shared with the private sector. So I think as automation takes hold in a lot of different industries, new business models, new creative triple bottom line business models that benefit citizens and government and not just the private sector are going to be key. And that's a lot of what the book's about, as well as some interesting stories about things that we did that we thought were going to be successful that weren't, and vice versa. And hopefully it's helpful for people that want to work in government with the private sector or private sector with government.
Well, excellent, Gabe. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely.